So they all about it.
All right, are we good?
And the other, and.
I'm not seeing Harry do his thing.
Right, it's been drug out.
When they read it.
Yeah, it's been drug out.
Are we
And
on? Are we on? Is audio
Should
on?
have everybody up in arms, whether you're a farmer.
So quick sound check, Ed, can you hear us?
Is that if we. do
Okay,
not follow
we're-
absolutely that's-
and Harry just pointed at me. That's great.
It's a little slower with this
Is there-
cable, just so you know.
Oh,
So I'm like 3 seconds behind.
Which means anybody that has a mortgage right now that is required by their lender to have flood insurance.
But at least I can see you this time. Last time the video, the audio. too.
I don't, I'm not. gonna have one. Flood insurance. You have to lower it to the- That's just what's awesome after. Because the county is going to see as they revalue and it's just on the side, it's just on the down. You know, that each and every. Yeah, it's. I can, we'll talk housing. We'll say the buyout. Yes. Yeah, no, it's huge and.
I think we'll wait just a few minutes in case other folks come in. I did get some spring break notifications that folks are doing their thing and won't be here today. So I think we have everybody, but we could wait a minute if you'd like.
I'm not sure to a lot of years old.
Is Chris, line or she?
Or maybe it's just how you're at Carrie.
Without the tag.
Without the tag.
Anything before.
We've got several online.
Yes.
Tom and,
Is that Ed? There's Ed.
Hey, Brendan.
Good to see you, Ed.
Okay.
Megan's on there.
We've got 8.
I'm doing my face.
I count 8 total. I'm not sure, but I think we've got only 4.
Yeah. I guess it's a little after 9 o'clock. So good morning, I'm Carrie Fleischer. And I'm welcoming and opening this meeting today as the Housing Commission. And so I think what we'll do is we'll go around the room first and then we'll do introductions and then turn to the people online. So I'm Carrie Fleischer. I'm a at-large member and just was handed off the vice chair role, so I'm running the meeting today. So welcome, everybody.
So I'm Erin Scarlett, Tallman County Commissioner and liaison to this group.
I'm Heidi Luquette, and I am a member at large. Michelle Yan, large employer representative.
TJ Fiorelli, Tillamook County Housing Coordinator.
Lynn Tone, Tillman County Community Development Staff.
John May, member at large.
All right, can we go online? Ed, do you want to go first?
Tom Jarrett, member at large.
Ed Gallagher, member at large.
Maria Carrillo, EDC.
Kristen Caprio, member at large.
Megan Carpenter, City of Tillamook representative.
Miss Carlson Swanson, nonprofit representative of Oregon Food Bank.
Dave Bennett, South County representative.
All right, do we have any other members of the community online that would like to check in with us?
I'm Gail Uzell, former member of the Housing Commission, South County.
All right, well, thank you guys, and we do have a new member in the audience today. If you'd like to introduce
Sure,
yourself.
I'm Nate Stice with Regional Solutions of the Office of Governor Pena Kovac.
Right, thank you for joining us today.
Certainly.
Invite myself up.
Come on up.
Come on, that name.
All right, moving on is we have a slot allocated to a mission minute. So if there's anybody that would like to bring something forward. TJ.
I'll kick us off. One of the things we were gonna say for the mission minute was our transition. I wanted to talk a little bit about how we got to where we are and just the steps that we took. So first off, as you all know, Ed, who is with us today, hi Ed, I'm very happy to see you today. He had taken a leave of absence as chair, and Chris Lackenmeyer as our vice chair just quickly stood up and said, yeah, absolutely, I'm gonna take over, we'll get this done. Chris is now having to work on many other activities at the moment, as I'm sure you're all aware. And we have gone through a transition period of identifying a new interim chair, as well as most likely our new permanent vice chair, providing, we'll see what happens if Ed is able to come back to us in a few months, and that has, we'll wait to see. But for now, we're very excited to have Carrie in the chair role. We did meet a couple of times, including with the executive committee. Carrie and I met on one-on-one. And we also had some discussions with multiple other members of the Housing Commission. I want to mention that you were recommended by a number of folks who said you'd be a wonderful person for this role. And I would like to thank everyone else who stepped up and said, you know what, I'll take this on if necessary. So thank you to this whole commission for keeping this work going. Carrie, thank you for taking the lead.
Thank you, guys. Is there anybody else with a mission minute?
I can follow with one. A former Tillamook resident who has gone on to become a commercial developer is looking to move back to Tillamook. And he is a personal friend of our families. And so we've had him over a few times on visits, and he's heard about this housing crisis, and he's very, very passionate about developing our community, and he's looking at some opportunities and ideally he's got a meeting actually with Lisa Greiner to learn about her experience, because he's looked at the building that's for sale on the corner of 3rd and Main. It's probably, I don't know, it's pretty daunting, but if anybody can do it, it's him. He works, he does the construction for Research, for the company Research organization. So he's back in the Carolinas right now building something for that. But anyway, I'm very excited. He's very serious about moving back to Tillamook and getting involved, and he's the kind of person that needs to stay busy. So I'm really excited about what the future holds for that. That's awesome. Yeah.
Great. Is there anybody else? Seeing a hand raised online, do you? Okay.
Lynn, is there anybody on the raising their hand? Okay.
All right. Well, we had a presentation scheduled, however, both the presenters were unable to meet or make our meeting today. So we'll be scheduling them for a future meeting.
Can I just bring up something about them, what they're doing? So they reached out to me and I connected them. Chris requested, well, actually he had some questions about communities of color and our Hispanic Latinx population and their housing challenges that they face that may be unique. And I couldn't personally answer that question, but I connected him with several community partners that I thought could. And they've given him some responses and I've been CC'd on those, and it was really, really enlightening. So I was just really grateful, first of all, that they were making that inquiry, and then we got some really good information about some of the challenges, and I think that we can be working on that within the context of the Housing Commission's work, but also in light of what the county is trying to do with decreasing barriers to access for housing and all of the other things that are right now.
That's great. Maybe we can schedule something on the agenda for the future.
Yeah.
Have a discussion around that. Yeah.
Information.
I can provide a quick update on that as well. So I touched base with Chris Ayosa, I believe that's how I say his last name, Tim Lawler, who are coordinating on this together. They did go before Board of County Commissioners and received a letter. I received the same template letter with a request for the Housing Commission to support the project. And what we discussed was that it would be wonderful if they could come and present the project to the Housing Commissioners. So before we sign a letter, we know what the project is doing in detail. They can give a little presentation. They thought that was a wonderful idea. There was some time constraints and they had to get a letter in for a certain funding tool that they were going after. And so Board of County Commissioners were able to shuffle that in earlier. We're very thankful for that, by the way. Chris and Tim were unable to be here in person today, and that's their preference. They'd really like to be in person to give the presentation about their project. So while they could have attended online, they chose to just, let's go ahead and wait until next month. The time constraints are no longer an issue. So we'll look forward to hearing about this project next month, and we'll have a letter prepared for our chair to sign once they're done.
Melissa has her hand up. Yes.
Miss, go ahead.
Thank you. I just want to mention that the owl is not picking up the softer speakers. So if folks could please speak up a little bit.
You're talking about me, aren't you, Miss?
Nope, I think you're right by the owl. So you're doing good. Thank you.
Thank you, Miss.
Can I throw in just one quick comment?
Please.
So with some of the ARPA funding that the county got, they have signed a contract with the Oregon Human Development Corporation, which is, it's a community action type agency that works on housing, but specifically with farm workers and Latinx population. And we've signed a contract with them to do a needs assessment for our community specifically related to that population. So we just awarded the contract very recently and I chatted with them. So hopefully we will have that in a few months, which will also help further the conversation that you brought up, Michelle, because we don't have a Latinx culturally specific serving organization in our community. And I think we often find it difficult when we get requests just exactly like that one to know where to direct people, because we have a lot of agencies that are culturally responsive and have folks on staff that are working with that population, but it's always a challenge to find sort of that centering place. And so we're hoping with the Oregon Human Development Corporation's work, we'll learn more about sort of what is happening and how we can best support that community. So.
The only other thing I thought we should mention, if people are not aware, Tim Waller is with Greenlight, and that's who's behind the Lilith apartment. So if people weren't aware of that, there's a connection there.
Right, and that was set to open, I think, in May.
Yes, May or June, one of the two.
I
And
know it's on my calendar to speak at that like the end of May. I haven't heard any change from Tim, but I'm sure I will if there are delays, but yeah.
it's just a quick note that we did hear from Tim, and they have not secured all of those spaces yet. They will be opening up an application
Yeah.
in the near future. Do you want to clarify that, Commissioner Stark?
Yeah, I just, I always monitor the Facebook for rent page and everybody was saying, they're all gone, it's all been done, everything went to care, nothing went to care, everything's from out of community, so I just reached out to Tim directly. I said, can you give me the information? And they, at this point, have not taken a wait list, they've not opened up that wait list, none of the units are spoken for. People can get on an information list at Greenlight, and I put that link on the Facebook page so that they will be emailed when the list opens up, but nobody is on a list and no units have been filled. So I think that's helpful for all of us as housing commissioners to know that it is a state-funded project. There are responsibilities and requirements for the developer to open that up for fair housing reasons. They can't just hand pick and pluck who they want. There's a whole process that needs to go with that, so.
So I had a similar number of phone calls, and it's worth mentioning as well for another project that we're supporting, which is in South County, the Kingfisher project. Folks thought that those were fully occupied as well, similar story. One thing that we do know is that some of those units are allocated towards employee housing, which we knew was the case from the very beginning. But one thing that I did reach out to Kevin Schluka and confirm is that there will be an opening for people to apply to enter into those units. And in particular, those efficiency units are ones that the folks down in South County have their eye on in terms of, housing opportunities. So they are not all secured and locked up. And I believe kingfisherpc.com was the email address he directed folks to if they wanted to look at the when and the how that is going to happen.
Somehow our outreach committee needs to probably look into this so that we can make sure that we're getting these posted on social media on our page.
Yeah.
And getting it shared out through the community pages, because that would go a long way to reducing the misinformation sharing. And it would also create more of a pipeline for people to know where to go for the correct information they feel like.
Michelle, I appreciate your comment. At our next department check-in, Lynn, myself, and Director Absher meet once per week. What I'll do is make sure that we connect, that would be the intention. Lynn is our go-to point person as staff in the county. So if there are conversations like these that Commissioner Starr or anybody else feel should go out to public outreach, we'll get it to Lynn, and then Lynn can communicate with the outreach committee. Does that work, you think?
It's great, yeah, in fact, I was already looking over it and like,
Perfect.
okay, can we do this?
Yeah.
Yeah, because I figure you guys get the notifications before we do, and Lynn's the one posting, so we just need
Yeah.
to just have that be on our radar and get them going on.
All right, great. Well, I'm gonna hand this over to TJ to begin the discussion on our local housing production strategies.
One thing I'll mention really quick, and Michelle, I don't know if you saw my response to your email this morning.
I did.
Did you want to use this time as an opportunity to talk about the draft one pagers that you're working on? Do you have something to?
I do, and I didn't print out a ton of copies, so I thought I could just pass these out. Did you happen to have one that you could share on?
You sent it to me via email, didn't you?
I did.
Yeah, let me pull it up while you do that.
So,
Because I've seen it.
okay, yeah, thank you. So early on, we did a little branding for our housing commission, and you guys might remember that everybody had played a role in vetting all of our brand elements. So we've got a team that helped us put together some templates that we can use. One of the things that we know we have a need for is kind of the snapshot, who is the housing commission? If we're a committee member, if we're trying to recruit somebody, or trying to explain what the committee is working on. This would just kind of be a quick one pager, very high level, lots of white space, not a lot of text. It's just, average person on the street. What is this and what does it mean to me and why should I care? So this is a mock-up and we're wanting to get your input on it. The mission is listed in the top bar, and my suggestion is that we would just have that be on every one of our committees. And there is a different color scheme, just for FYI, for each of the committees, there'd be a little bit of a different color scheme, so we'd be able to differentiate it that way. And then it's kind of on the where it says outreach committee, that would say legislative committee or finance committee, et cetera. And then kind of a very brief statement regarding, why we exist and what we're doing, and maybe some of the top points of our purpose and what we intend to do and accomplish with our committee's work. And then the 3 icons, this is fairly arbitrary. We just happen to have those icons developed for our graphic suite. So we just drop them in there and use them as kind of bullet points for our committee anyway. There are 3 of our 4 main objectives, which is to provide information, to generate engagement, and to showcase experience. And then there's a little blurb explaining what each of those means. So it's kind of the who we are and what we're doing, why it matters statement piece. At the bottom, we would have our social media icons, and they would be hyperlinked, would have the correct email address, and then our web address at the bottom. So that would be on all of the different one-pagers. So we wanted to get your input on it, and once we fine-tune the format, then we would request from each of the committee chairs to work within their committees to populate this information for the top 3, why, and the kind of who, what, why are part of this white space here. So input is welcome.
I think it's very visually easy to read and to identify what it is and what, I guess, just at first glance, I like the mission right up top and especially the icons and bringing out those 3 points. What does this committee do? I think it's pretty easy to understand. That's just my impression.
Thank you, appreciate that.
I agree, Carrie. I like the consistency of having the mission the same right up to where it says housing builds community, because it shows that all these committees are working together. But the specific mission below each committee is super interesting. I like the idea of having the graphics on here as well. I wonder what committee chairs and other folks think. Is this something that we could maybe support the Housing Commission on, coming up with some ideas for maybe some icons that go along with our 3 or 4 strategies in each committee? Is that some way that we might be able to support the outreach committee? Or how could we support you?
Well, what we were hoping is if people were comfortable using the icons that we have, so we don't have to create more graphic design work, since that's sunsetted and we don't have that person available at this point. We would be looking for the statement, the purpose statement of your committee, a few of the highlights of what you're working on or what your priority goals are as a committee, and then kind of those top three headings and what the objective is under each of those headings would probably be the ask. So once we got that, we could populate that into the templates and produce those. We can always modify them and update them as things happen. But right now, we might be really working on ADUs and on middle housing, and so that's what goes in here. And then once we get, like, we got the ADU ordinance done, and we've got ADUs being built, and now we're working on the land inventory, then that's what gets plugged in. So when it's always fresh and current as far as what the main objectives are, and it's the communication piece to the public of what we're doing. And it's also potentially a recruiting piece for either ad hoc or, housing commission members.
I'd like to speak to that just a little bit since I'm relatively new on the commission. And that was kind of a challenge for me when I came on. I wanted to plug into a committee. I know that's where the work takes place. But I felt a little inadequate in the beginning because I wasn't really sure where I fit. And I was trying to just read what we had on each of the committees and figure out really what made sense. But something like this, I'm not overly visual, but when I saw this, I was like, this is exactly what would have been helpful to me as a new commission member to really understand, okay, this is what this committee does, these are their focus areas. And I just think that would be helpful as we go forward with recruiting and bringing new people on, and even for the public who's gonna look at, the commission overall, when they're able to see this, like, okay, gosh, this is what this is good work that they're doing, so.
The other use for this would be if we're hosting an engagement event, and we're tabling, or we want to present something to city councils, we can put these in their packets. So they're pretty multifunctional. We would also link them to on our website, have that location. So.
Absolutely. One thing we can also do is make sure you have the full presentation of all of the committees. It says like 5 slides for each one, right? Sort of a front slide and then the 4 priorities for each one. And that was also the same presentation, I think, that Commissioner Scardi presented at the Housing Summit as well. So it would be good to get on the Housing Commission website and then share with Outreach so that you can bake that in to these, because I think it spells out really well what the housing commissioners in each of those committees are sort of identifying as those priorities.
And I did take this information comes off that slide deck for that outreach committee. Nice. So,
and one thing to throw out there for icons, I know your graphic design person is gone. There's a really great project I used to direct students to often, which is called the Noun Project, and it's free icons. You can recolor them. They come in black and white, but you can recolor them inside of Canva or inside of PowerPoint or anything.
okay.
I have yet to find a keyword that it doesn't have an icon for.
And that may be something we can work within the committee if we want to switch out the icons. The finance committee might have other icons that are tied to monetary, images or whatever. So, and code committee and development committee might have hammer or, something that depicts what they're working on more. We wanted to showcase, though, the diversity. Obviously, you look at the banner and you look at these icons, it's showcasing the diversity of housing. And that was something that we heard loud and clear and wanted to prioritize messaging around that. And that was an intentional, design choice. So timeline, it would be awesome if we could maybe turn this around between now and our next meeting. So we have the templates, I have the word counts, and I have the slide deck. So I could do one of 2 things. I could look at the slide deck and attempt to populate the committees and send it back to the committees and have you guys fine tune it from there. Or I can give you the word counts and, the kind of the buckets that need to get filled in, fill in the blank, and have you work on that. So I don't know which would be preferred by the committee chair. So I'm looking at Carrie since we're.
I personally would love to have it pre-filled out, so that way when we take it to the committee, we can just vet it and just before time constraint purposes, that we're not spending half most of our meeting on just picking language. It'd be just nice to, just review it, say, okay, is this fit, or hey, we want to bring this topic up, or this priority versus another, or highlight something else that we're working on. But I think that would be just more efficient for a committee time, just to have something pre-populated, and then we can just wordsmith what's there, or just have some minor suggestions. Then I think maybe most of the work may be done, we could just, hey, this looks great, rubber stamp it, and pass it back to you. I think it would just, especially with just a quick turnaround of a month, we have one meeting, 2 weeks. So that would be able to give right back to you before the next housing commission meeting.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think we save a step instead of us putting something out there that you then review and change, and then we look at it again. I think that's a great start.
Okay, and this, I wanted to make sure you had input.
I've been following the conversation, and then I'm appreciating the input of others and the work put in. I don't have anything to add.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, well, let's plan on that, and I'll plug those in, and I'll get the icons. I might need some help with some of that, that I can work with, our team to fill in the blanks. Okay. Divide that. It's each one. Well, that's a good idea. Share the love. All right, thank you for taking extra time for that.
Thank you. Be nice to have those one pagers out.
Yeah. And then we'll also have one just on the housing commission kind of as a whole, and then we have a template that we can do, like, we want to do one for ADUs specifically. So when we have this, we could have one for mass timber, we could, anything that we want to really call attention to. We've got the materials now and drop that in.
Great. And then it's really easy to share out that way,
Yes.
through like social media and other avenues.
All right. Well, I guess we're gonna go ahead and get back to our local housing production strategies. And I'm gonna turn this over to TJ to lead us forward on this conversation.
Great, thank you, Carrie. In the chat, for the benefit of folks online, I am going to add a link. Ooh, I don't know if that's possible, we'll see. Lynn, are we still muted?
We might not have chat. I'm pretty sure
Chat is turned off.
chat is turned off, yeah.
Oh, that's a bummer. Folks, let me go ahead and give you a quick search term. I apologize, we'll have to do it this way. So if you type in housing production strategies guidance, you will find a couple of different websites. The most likely one to show up first will be from Oregon.gov, and there is a PDF of the housing production strategies that we'll be discussing today. We handed these out last month. I brought a couple of extra copies in case folks didn't bring their copy in person today. So while folks online are looking for that, who would like an additional copy today?
I was online last time, so I didn't have that.
Right.
Actually, you did email it to
Did I
me.
give you
I
two of those? You got one,
I
right?
just have one, but you had emailed it to me.
John, you need one too?
What was
Commissioner
what was your
Scarpelli?
name? Yeah, I left mine in, I'm gonna ask.
Right. Absolutely. Michelle?
No, I'm good. I had one, I didn't bring a vision though, but,
We need to.
yeah. I have to really, I need my extra strength glasses for.
Yeah, I did not bring magnifying glasses for anyone, so I apologize for that.
Pause for just a minute, do
Yeah.
something I should have done at the beginning of the meeting.
Yeah.
And I just actually give Nate a more full introduction. I don't know how many of you, I think everybody is familiar with Regional Solutions, right, and the Regional Solutions team. So Jennifer Purcell was our regional solutions coordinator for a very long time. She, as we all know, has moved on. Nate Stice is stepping into that position for the regional solutions team. So he is our, I don't know if regional coordinator is the right name or right title, but Nate's the guy. And I had an opportunity to have lunch with Nate about a week ago. And we had some amazing and far-ranging conversations, but a lot of it was about housing. And so I'm really excited that he's here with us today. You know, we just had the opportunity to say, what can regional solutions do? Is there a space that we have not really fully stepped into for our regional solutions partners to help us as we go forward looking at the needs for housing in our community? So I appreciate that you're with us today, and I'm pleased, thank you for letting him join us at the table. But
Sorry to have the chutzpah to ask.
I think you will all like him. He's very easy to talk to and very interested in the work that we're doing and housing in general. So thank you for joining us.
Yeah, so it's just two regional solutions. The tagline currently is the governor's collaborative approach to community and economic development. We're thinking about sort of where regional solutions works and where we play. And just for context, I have been the coordinator in the North Central region, which is 5 counties in the Mid-Columbia, for about the last 7 years. I sort of at the end of Governor Brown's tenure, served as the interim director of the program, covering a lot of the state, including working a little bit with the team here, which is a really great team. Like, we got some really great folks from state agencies representing the area. But the one issue that I've worked on the most in the North Central region is housing. And so I think the proper phrase for what we did is nerd out on housing over lunch. But I've cut the housing, but I'm really interested in thinking about how to address the crisis. And I've spent a lot of time sort of at every level in my home region where I reside in the North Central region, sort of thinking about different tools and ways to do it, including one thing that sort of came out of my region and I helped to lead for the state is the Attainable Housing Pilot Project, which I know you all are on with. But in terms of like housing here, I'm like mostly here to steal your ideas. So you all have just done amazing work. So I'm going to go back to like Hood River and Wasco kind of be like, hey, look what these guys are doing over here. Why are we so far behind?
Yeah. Thank you for that. And the other thing I believe that I found out in our lunch is that Nate also went to school with TJ, that they know each other as well. So what I found out is that TJ knows.
Well, no, Nate was a supervisor in government relations when I was a very young intern looking for a job.
We ran into each other, and I've also like run across TJ, and his brownfields work is just impressive, and want to steal that for elsewhere. Like your dissertation was like brownfields and housing or something, right? Like, yeah. So
just one more piece of proof that TJ knows absolutely everybody. Yeah. Because every time something comes up, so like even Stuckmeyer at DLCD, TJ's like, oh yeah. So he knows everybody in this arena. So I was like, one more, good job.
A lot of them came out of the U of O. Yeah, I think that's the exciting part. PSU's got some good folks too, by the way. They're doing some great housing work. I'm sure you're plugged in with them, Nate.
Well, my wife has a MERT from there, so.
Okay, so that's where the planning lingo comes from. You know what you're talking about here. Can you tell us a little more about the Attainable Housing Pilot? I was very curious about that. You mentioned it.
Well, I mean, I don't want to take up too much airtime, but several years ago, Regional Solutions was looking around and thinking about like this issue of, specifically sort of Regional Solutions entry point into the conversation initially in mind was this idea of the dirty word, we're not supposed to use workforce housing, or even that's where we change it to attainable, right? We're hearing from a lot of employers, we're having issues. And so like we had this idea of like, number one, let's look at the state enterprise and go through and ask state agencies like what they're doing. And then also like try to design a program that would get employers to put skin in the game around housing, right? And so that was sort of the entry point of the idea. We did a lot of conversations with developers, with employers, and again, with state agencies. At the end of the day, we wound up finding a very small pot from OHCS, I think about $2 million to go out with, I think we did an RFI and the request for information, and then we did a request for proposal to communities to bring us these partnerships with employers. And I don't, was it Pelican was the one?
So it's actually in the Kingfisher project now, but Pelican was the original grant recipient that was part of that project that then they transferred into Kingfisher.
Yeah, and so, there were pilot projects across the state. which I've since lost track of. None of them wound up being in my home region, so. You know, I think, it was an interesting exercise and, you know, we got sort of started on tools and then a pandemic hit and that money, it was actually gonna be sort of a longer term fund at OHS. The former OHS director Salazar had identified some funding and then that all got swept to meet very real critical needs at this end of the spectrum, which is, you know, the focus of Governor Kotek. And now, as I've had my own housing journey, you know, I'm very interested in working on the continuum, but my focus is now really here as well. And so I'm at the lower end in my spectrum.
Well, and let's hope that as we come out of the pandemic and under the new governor with emergency orders relating specifically to homelessness and housing and housing production, where she, you know, that those, some of those tools were previously identified, maybe will be something that comes back around as she has directed every state agency to look at how they can help. So
Just doubling down. Like there's some memos that I want to review. I haven't quite gotten them yet, but I'm really curious to see like, and I think it's a different era where like, you know, it's sort of me and a colleague going out and like sort of pushing on corners of agencies. And this is a directive coming directly from the top to do it with a no nonsense attitude. So.
thank you, and thank you for.
Sorry
I felt
for-
really bad. I was realized I should have introduced Mr.
Sorry
This is
for-
not a typical visitor, right? Jennifer used to participate.
And I have to apologize. I gotta leave in about 10 minutes to get to the team meeting. I'm going to try to make these meetings as I can. A good excuse to be over here. But the team meeting is, I think, about the same time. So starts at 10.
Well, this was the perfect segue, in fact, for our housing production strategies conversation. And trust folks online had an opportunity to find the document, and folks here in the room do as well. I'm gonna go ahead and for just a refresher, I'm gonna pull up some information that I had talked about last month, and then I'm gonna share my screen again in a few minutes. I have an interactive board. So as folks are making suggestions and recommendations for each of these categories based on what you're reading in this report, things you might have read over the past month, or ideas that you're just cooking up because you're a smart housing commissioner who's been doing this for a while. Come up with those ideas and I will put them on this board for us. Well, I think that's the longest delay ever.
Did you have an extra copy?
I do. So again, just as you look at these recommendations, they include these 3 different icons, which talk a little bit about the risk inherent with implementing one of these solutions. Remember, the green says you're pretty safe to just go ahead and do this. It is very unlikely it'll cause displacement or gentrification or have unintended consequences. Yellow was to proceed cautiously and carefully, meaning that a strategy needs to be monitored for potential impacts and possibly paired with mitigating strategies in certain types of neighborhoods where it's expected that the strategy being recommended could have potential unintended consequences. And the red is saying, listen, we really think almost certainly there would be unintended consequences in at least some of the neighborhoods that you'd be recommending this potential idea or strategy. Stop, think it through. This is where we go back to committees, back to the executive committee, and lean on leadership as well for guidance as we think through and vet out some of the more challenging strategies. Again, it's important to note something that the level of impact is in the same measure as the level of risk. So a lot of your green ones are going to be sort of incremental or small in scale, mostly. A lot of your red ones are going to be those kinds of projects that'll have big impacts, but also big potential risks to mitigate. So I want to ground our conversation in there are wonderful ideas in this. And then there are also things we have to think about. Quick review, there are these 7 categories in the housing production strategies guidance. The first one being zoning and code changes. That's our development committee, largely working on that kind of work, as well as regulatory impediments, reducing those regulatory impediments. That's a lot of the work that development committee also is thinking about, but also outreach committee and some of the other folks. Financial incentives as well as financial resources, those are both tools that the finance committee looks at. In terms of incentives, what are the things that we can provide that create housing and reduce those costs? Multiple family rental housing fund and our housing fund for this year that the finance committee is currently working on, those are incentives. But then there's also resources, things coming from the state, funding coming from the bipartisan infrastructure law, from foundations and other places. What are the resources that we can leverage? And then, of course, E, F, and Z are some of the ones we've sort of already done. We're looking at tax exemption and abatement. The county has been looking at property for future land uses, acquisition, leases, partnerships. Those are long-range goals. And then customize options. In our next couple of meetings, after we get past these initial categories and you all have a chance to sort of think through what we might want to do, I think it would be a good time then to open the discussion for customized options. What are some things that you've sort of thought up as creative strategies based on the conversations and the recommendations that have come out of those? For today, we are going to continue looking at these first 4 categories: zoning and code changes, reducing regulatory impediments, and then financial incentives and resources. And a quick overview, and again, this is all in the packet that you have, but I want to just share this for the benefit of the public and of the group. Category A, those zoning changes and code changes, those are strategies that a local government can take to encourage needed housing production through zoning and code modifications. And these strategies can also include regulations to ensure housing goals are met. When you start to think about, for example, House Bill 2001, which requires cities to go through housing production strategies, this is kind of what they're talking about right there, the ensuring that those goals are going to be met quantitatively. We talked a little bit about some recommended strategies last month, which was ensuring that land is zoned for higher density and not developed at lower density, so maximizing the efficiency of that site. And you all likely remember that was one of the criteria in our housing fund. And we're looking at what is the affordability target, who does this benefit, and a little bit of a description there as well, talking about minimum density standards and allowing detached homes in medium density zones. The second one was looking at zoning changes to facilitate the use of low-cost housing types. For example, we're thinking about mass timber, manufactured housing, or other rapidly deployable housing types that are oftentimes less expensive. These are largely covering that workforce housing range, and so the primary focus of this group here. And Michelle, if I'm not mistaken, your son has is doing one of these things, right? I just want to stop there because we have a housing commissioner who's doing this now, which is super cool. It's for sale or for rent, so it allows those, upward mobility opportunities for people to sort of build money and wealth. And these are looking at, ADUs, manufactured housing, multifamily housing, single room occupancies, micro shelters, or other things that we think of. For example, mass timber or other things that we might develop as ideas. The category B, the reducing regulatory impediments, were strategies to address known impediments. So things to provide needed housing, which include but not limited to things like process and permitting and identifying infrastructure impediments. I want to lift up the work of the development committee, and in particular, the idea that brought forward by Ed, who was saying we need an opportunity. We need a list of sites that could come online if we were to do the work with the owner and a potential developer and see that there aren't significant constraints like infrastructure. Where are those opportunities? So that's one of the things that development committee is sort of already thinking about right now. Strategies there are like removing development code impediments for conversions. These are primarily for rent. So this is largely multiple family rental housing, and it's kind of covering the gamut. And the description is to streamline conversions of a larger single-family homes into multiple-use dwellings. And then we have also strategy B16, which is talking about density, but more equitably, right? So making sure that everyone in our community has access to housing and that it's dense enough, but not too dense, that sweet spot, so it's affordable. It doesn't change the character of our community. And then category C and D, the financial incentives and resources. We've highlighted a couple of things here. Category C talks again about incentives that cities or counties can offer to developers to encourage them to produce needed housing. We're doing this right now with the housing fund, but there may be other strategies, like for example, leveraging relationships with employers. We talked about that last month, and the finance committee had some really great input from you all to incorporate into those discussions. And then category D, which is a list of resources or programs at the local, state, or federal level that can provide funding for housing projects. And this is primarily subsidized, affordable housing projects. But one thing that we know that we need here in Tillamook County, as well as across the entire state, is resources that are going to support all the way up to middle housing, the workforce housing, the stuff that doesn't typically get incentives, but is so much more expensive to build here than it is in other places. And here we were sort of thinking about manufactured and modular housing, both for rent or for sale. And the description there is giving bonus density incentives for manufactured and factory built housing. And so those are things that might allow for an additional dwelling unit, for example, or reduced open space as a requirement for development. There's lots of different things that we could recommend there. And then also employer-assisted housing programs. This was D5, looking at publicly subsidized, affordable, and workforce. So all the way from 30 up to 120% are our full focus. Again, for rent and for sale, and the description here is providing a channel through which employers can help their employees with the low cost of owning or renting a home close to their workplace. So when we start to think about geography, this is where our GIS tools are going to come in handy. We know where our employers are. A lot of our employers responded to our employer survey. We have those mapped out. So as we start to look at where employee housing could go, we can start to think about how far people are away from those large employers, or those clusters of employers that are along 101, for example, like Rockaway, you have a lot up there, right? And then patches of sort of just nothing in between. You can think about housing in places close to those areas. So I'll go ahead and stop sharing here. I'm going to move to another screen in just a moment. But what I'd like to do is really open this up for discussion for different strategies that you all think, based on what you're reading and what you're thinking, that we could add to this board here. I'm going to share my screen and you'll see what we're doing. So as you all talk, I am going to include or add sticky notes to these categories. And what I'll do is, Lynn, if it's all right, I might ask you to play back up for me and write down some strategies in case I'm not writing fast enough. Is that okay with you?
One thing that comes to my mind, TJ, is that we are already doing many of these. So I wanted to, make sure that we pre-populate it with that, so we aren't, so we can, look at the new ideas.
Yeah, we are absolutely doing a lot of these already. And one thing we can do is, if you want me to, I can add sticky notes with each one of those. What I'd like to do is highlight the things that we think are opportunities moving forward, and maybe I just won't add the sticky note for things we have, and I can circle back later and just add maybe a separate section for that.
Two, I think on zoning and code changes that I kind of highlighted, that I don't think we're currently doing, is allowing for single room occupancy in residential zones. And as well as promoting cottage clusters. I mean, I don't think we've focused on that in particular. It's part of our middle housing strategy, and legislation that Suzanne Weber is working on, and I'll touch bases on later. But I think those are just two that we haven't focused on presently. I mean, it's part of our legislative strategy, at least the cottage clusters, but not necessarily highlighted that type out.
So you're calling out two, if I'm hearing you right?
Yes, that would be A7 and A8.
Thank you.
Yeah, one of us, or both of us, or however we decide. Whatever, we'll come back for it.
Can somebody remind me what FAR stands for?
Floor area ratio. So as you build up, you can kind of get the same number of units on the second story as you had on the first, so it doubles that.
And then, and another one that I highlighted was manufactured community preservation zone. It's A16, and it basically tries to preserve existing manufactured housing parks by kind of doing a zone change to eliminate it from being rezoned or somebody else buying that location and redevelop it into something else and displacing those homes. And I think we have numerous parks in our communities and they do provide valuable housing. And some of them are kind of pockets that were developed in the 70s prior to zoning.
And it can happen quite quickly. I think I remember right after I started in my role, it was the beginning of 2022, I think, and one of the parks here locally closed. And folks didn't have anywhere to go. Didn't that happen like very rapidly too?
That was an RV park, not
Oh, okay.
manufactured housing.
But there were a couple of parks, I think, that were in Garibaldi that closed for a
Yes.
few years.
That's
And
what I
that
was
was,
saying, right.
that was some years ago now, but it was a very big deal. I was working at CARE at the time and a lot of low income folks that were just suddenly displaced. Right.
That's the hardest part too, right? We're not talking about people that have a bank account with cash. You're like, okay, this is uncomfortable. No, they have nowhere else to go.
But what about like the situation on the Trask Park? Has anybody driven through that one on Giga Road? The quality of those homes are, some of them are really, really bad.
They are, and there used to be money in Oregon Housing Community Services to help upgrade our manufactured home parks, and I don't know what the status of that is today. It went away for a while. We can hope that under Governor Kotek that maybe funds will be put back into that, because that's a really great program when it works, is to go into parks like that and be able to upgrade those units for them.
Yeah, because I mean, I would say 5 of them are, in my mind, inhabitable. They're really bad. And I mean, I don't know if that's our responsibility, but it seems like somebody needs to take the gun on getting them.
Well, there is a rehabilitation topic in here. I just don't know if it only applies to, if it does not include mobile homes.
Yeah, we give the financial resources. I admit I don't have all these, but I think that's it. I think there's a key piece there. And I would suggest it is not only manufactured, but if you go back to the comprehensive plan for the city of Tillamook, they have identified that greater than 50% of their housing stock is substandard. So it's a really large issue in our, and certainly I know in the city of Tillamook because they've said so, but I assume across some of our other communities as well, that the older housing that we have has, fallen into disrepair. And there are some programs to assist, but there aren't enough slots to take care of all the
Right.
But there's probably something in here, preservation wise.
There are state programs, and one of the things to note is that typically it's for homeowners or homeowners that do the work for a rental that they own. It's not like money that government or local government can go and distribute. This is where I think an outreach committee effort could be really helpful, right? Here is this resource, here's how to get it.
And I guess I think two others that I highlighted in this sections was where I highlighted a lot of them. That I just wanted to call out was A24 and A26, which is legalize alternative housing type on wheels and in parks. That goes back, kind of touching back to, citing these housing types outside of manufactured home parks and RV parks. Just getting a little bit more creative in what we allow. And then also legalize and encourage tiny homes in villages. We have those in a lot of them. I mean, there's definitely a lot of constraints right now. I know City Toll is working on that, but allowing some, and Sarah's touched on it before, but that's something that we can look at as well.
I have a suggestion.
Please go ahead.
And since I've been out of the loop, it may be already talked about, but TJ and I have been talking about ghost homes, and I know former Mayor Weber was interested in that topic as well. And how could the Housing Commission promote county or city programs that will deal specifically with abandoned homes within the communities, because they really will kill a neighborhood if you let a home go vacant for too long. So I'm not sure where that fits in, but that was one that would be an action item.
That's one of those creative ones that, isn't on the housing production strategies, but is certainly one that fits very well with the needs of our community. And in my view, Ed, tell me if you think differently, but in my view, it might be an incentive that we could think about. What are your thoughts in terms of strategies there? Do you just want to throw it out for thinking to start?
In doing a little research on it in the state of Washington, they have a list of the mortgage holders, which are usually savings and loans or banks that have these zombie homes waiting for either legal procedures to go, or they just fall off the charts. They're not a big enough issue for them to spend time on. And that would seem to me to be something that we could get some help from the state to identify ownerships, how to do outreach to the lenders, because they had a list in Washington of who the contact was within the individual banks that deal with that issue. So it would save a dozen transfers if we had a list of who those people are in Oregon. We could just help the local governments then. I know TJ and I talked to the mayor of Wheeler about that issue, and that was one that was of concern. That would be good to do follow-up.
Yeah, absolutely. That's one, you're right. Wheeler is very keen to see something along those lines.
Is there any kind of city ordinance on those people that own those homes? I had, on Liddy and I in our subdivision, we had 4 empty lots that the grass got too tall on, and we got a notification from the city police that we were gonna be fined $11,500 per lot if we didn't mow it. And what about these banks and corporations that own these? No, they do that.
Yeah, but then you're right, that's.
Why can't they send a thing saying, you get this place looking presentable, or number one, we'll take it. Or number two, you're gonna be fined this much money until it is.
Absolutely.
Is there an ordinance for that?
Megan's on, maybe she knows.
Yeah, actually, the city of Tillamook has code enforcement now, which we haven't had for several years. I mean, we were hit and miss with it, but we now officially have a code enforcement officer. So for the last 2 years, we've been sending letters to make sure people cut their grass, keep their hedges trimmed. It's slow going, but we do fine them and take them to court if they do not comply with our codes. So we are working on that now. But as far as zombie homes and if taxes aren't paid on a property, isn't that something that starts at the county level?
So sort of like you kind of think about it as like the living, the dead, and the undead. It's kind of how I think about it. The living is the sites like John is talking about. You have people who own those, or they're renting them out, and the person who owns that home is still paying the taxes, and the mortgage just isn't maintaining the yard. And so you have an individual that you can send a bill to, and you have an enforcement action you can take against the person. The dead would be the ones that have gone through the full foreclosure process. And so they have gone through foreclosure and the bank owns them, but there's no legal remedies, no legal steps left to take. The challenge that we find, which is where most zombie homes lie, is sort of in that undead category, where the bank takes the initial steps to go through foreclosure, but for some reason, they typically stop in the middle of that process. And so it leaves in the state of Oregon a 2-year period of time for the prior owner or any one of their heirs to step up and say that we are going to claim our rights on that property, we'll pay the back taxes, and we'll take that property back. The challenge there is in that interim, that 2-year period of time, there's nobody to find. There's nothing to do there. So there are states, like for example, in Pennsylvania, Pittsburgh really led this through their vacant to vibrant program, where they have the banks pay a $10,000 deposit as soon as they begin the foreclosure process. And if that doesn't finalize, then the county gets, or whoever the taxing district is or the taxing authority gets that money to then allocate to local government to do the maintenance. And so the vacant to vibrant program basically is a whole bunch of maintenance people going out, mowing yards and maintaining areas until they have some developer or somebody that's going to take that property on. That's one strategy that we could take, but defining the heavy hammer approach might not work for those zombie homes. It's really going to be incentives, and largely incentives for the people who could come and claim it in that 2-year period of time. I do like Ed's strategy from before we talked about this, which is let's maintain a timeline from when that 2-year clock starts. Because when it ends, we want to know about that on day one, because then we can begin to take actions in collaboration with county commissioners and legal counsel, or with cities, if it's within cities. Long-winded answer to that.
Yeah.
Oh, interesting.
I know, I'm just sitting here thinking about this, like, so if it's dead, gone through foreclosure, but the bank still owns it, or whoever, the savings and loan, what is the legal recourse to extract that from, so that it can be rehabilitated and lived in again?
They'll oftentimes leave it there because they have no portfolio manager handling those issues on the lowest, part of their portfolio. They're going after all the projects and the sites that are worth money. And so for us, it really is having that list of bank contacts and when that 2-year period of time is ended, so that we can reach out to them and say, hey, I know you probably don't have anybody working on this, but could you maybe get somebody to help us out?
Okay.
I tried to buy
Totally worth it.
a few of those in Tillamook after the 08 crash. There were numerous that got foreclosed. And it was nearly impossible to get to someone that I could talk to that you could actually get an answer from on whether this home would be for sale or not, or when it would go on auction block. I think the system's really abused, and it's too bad that taxpaying people that have property get tickets for it, but yet these entities that just let them set, they don't have any incentive whatsoever to maintain that property.
Absolutely.
And it's
like a legislative committee.
I know,
Yes,
it
it
does.
does.
I'm thinking, if this is a legislative committee issue, what's the state level fix? Is there one that we want to develop and float for either Representative Javity or Senator Weber for another session?
I also think that timeline could be narrowed to 1 year. I don't know, why is it 2 years?
I think it really depends on the legal situation of the property that's being foreclosed on. Is it an estate? Is it somebody that's just can't, they're alive and living and just can't no longer
Walk
afford
away.
it?
Yeah.
And in that case, I believe I've seen the process on a former home I sold. The owner could no longer pay the bill. It was subject to foreclosure. And I think it was just right around coming out of COVID. It was foreclosed on, it went through the process, and it sold, I think it was about a year process at most. So it really depends, I think, on, really the circumstances in which it's been foreclosed. So, things do take time, but I also think it depends on whether it's a voluntary action where you just are deeded it back to the bank. And, but also banks too are not necessarily wanting to hold these properties on their books either. They're not in the business of holding property. So they like to get them off their books as quick as possible too. So I mean, generally they're incentivized to sell them at a lower cost, less to builders or flippers. So that way they can get it off their books and get it back in production too, because they can possibly lend on it again. So I think it really depends on each circumstance. And so I don't know if you can just legislate your way out of those situations, because, you know, if it's as dealing with the state, you might have to deal with 12 heirs that may have a claim on that property. Now, if they all sign off and say, then, yeah, we're good, go forth and do good, it might transfer fairly quickly. So I think it really depends on a situation by situation case.
It'd be interesting to find a developer who does this on a regular basis, because you said you tried it, it was just sort of like hitting a brick wall. And so there's probably a developer out there somewhere that's figured out the tips and tricks. It would be an interesting.
Stuart Simmons,
I was thinking.
he turns them over all the time. He just finished one on Ninth Street.
It would be interesting to talk to Stuart to see what it takes, and is there a way we can assist and incentivize more of that happening, right? Because it's the incentive, you know, instead of the hammer, carrot instead of the hammer. And if Stuart knows how to do it, what's he doing that's different? Yeah.
Oh, he
exactly.
is. He turns them into nice homes, and he lives by me, and he does it all pretty much on his own.
Yeah.
He goes in and turns them over and makes a tidy profit. And, I don't know how he gets them. I
That's
get
the
against
question,
him
is
on
how
a
to
few
get
of them.
around that whole complicated loop, or, you know, what's that look like? That might be in the creative section, TJ.
Yeah,
right?
absolutely. That's a great point.
That would be, in the custom options, if we have someone who knows how to do it in our community, but maybe is limited in the capacity of how many they can do, are they willing to share their
He's a
model?
pretty close mouth guy, you know.
Well, and most of people are, because they're like, this is how I do it, and I'm not gonna tell you, because that's what this is.
And it could be that, I know the sheriff's office is involved in selling those properties, so it might behoove us to talk to the
I
sheriff.
talked to Rachel in my office about property sales, if they're ones that have ended up at the county, that
They're
they're sold by the sheriff.
sold by the sheriff, at least on bank foreclosures as well.
Okay.
There is a public process, so they may be aware of, at least informing us of the process and what they do.
Yeah, who we would go back to. Because I'm guessing the sheriff, if it's like the foreclosed ones we hear, the property tax ones we get, it's a sheriff's sale, but it really isn't the sheriff that does it. So
Yeah.
that would be curious to know who is that.
Who handles the bank ones, because they do appear on the county sheriff's sales website that's publicly available.
We're super lucky to have Carrie both as the chair of the legislative committee as well as an expert in taxation. I wonder if you might be able to do some of that footwork with Rachel, and then we can maybe go to legislative committee and talk about the state level focus. And then in the development committee, I wonder if we could invite Stuart, maybe not ask him to give us his secrets, but tell us a little bit about some of the hard-won lessons he might have learned
Yeah.
over time. You think that's possible?
Yeah, I'll swing in and talk to Stuart.
Okay.
I'll do that.
If you could invite him to a development committee, that would be amazing. If he says yes, we'll get him on there.
I'd suggest on the legislative ideas that Senator Weber would be very interested in helping on it, because that was an issue in Tillamook that she was quite concerned about.
Yeah.
Off season, off
Yeah.
session, be a great time to pull her in and us, you know, give her the.
Yeah, we could do some groundwork and then see if it has some legs to stand on after we discuss it in the committee.
Carrie, is it possible to have a list of the properties that just haven't paid taxes in a couple of years? Do those exist?
It is already published on every, the ones that are subject to redemption are on the county's website.
So I can pull that into the development committee's GIS tool, and we can internally have a discussion about where there might be opportunities.
Once a suit is filed, those properties are posted on the county's assessment and tax website.
So it's all public already.
It is already all public already.
Trevor,
Hey, everybody. I've got a meeting with Senator Weber on the 20th, which is the day after our next legislative committee. So I guess just a note to TJ and to Carrie that if we want to discuss some things, I'm happy to put that on my agenda to check in with her for. I'm already checking in with her on Senate Bill 406 to see how we can best support that bill and her efforts as it goes over to the House side.
Great.
Thank you, Trevor. Ed, I think you brought up an excellent topic.
You know, it might be a fast way to put 15 homes back on the market if we were able to find a way to facilitate this happening more rapidly.
You know, and I start to think a little bit about, you know, especially when I moved to this county as a new person, I'm driving through most beautiful scenery. And then you come up to a couple of key places, and I think I've used this term before, it looks like a structure is going back into the earth and the trees are growing up around it. And I mean, that comes to mind for me, tourism opportunities. I wonder if tourism or economic development folks might be interested in this topic too. I'm thinking about the gateways to our beautiful communities. If there are resources available to help support not only beautification of our environment, but also new housing units, that's something I'll throw out there. It's certainly not my wheelhouse, but something that leadership could have discussions about maybe.
I didn't know that the EDC is.
Oh, good point. Maria, are you on?
I am on.
We were just throwing out, I'm sure if you heard the comment there, we were throwing out possibly the idea of collaborating with EDC or tourism on the zombie house topics. Wonder if you had any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think that's a great idea.
Great. Ed, thank you for bringing up that really great production strategy. And I think, again, that's a custom one.
The other thing we should keep in mind with that one is, especially if 406 passes, you know, putting the highest density possible housing is appropriate for the neighborhood that zombie house was in. Like if it's going to come all the way down, you know, could we put a quadplex or something else on that and maximize the density and work intentionally with developers to that end? Judging from the looks of most of them, I don't think there's anything to salvage.
No.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a great point, Michelle. Thank you. All right, other strategies, other ideas that folks are seeing in this document or have in mind that could be good opportunities. We have several in zoning and code changes. So development committee has quite a bit to look at.
On the regulatory impediments category B, there was one here on expedite permitting for needed housing types. I really like that one. And then streamlining the permit process. I know that's always a challenge, depending on so many barriers that we have and obstacles, but and I thought there was one here that was talking about plans, having some sort of I don't see that anywhere now.
Were those like the pre-approved?
Yeah,
That's something that a lot of communities, and I think there might even be an example next to that one. I'm not sure which number it is specifically, but other communities have done this.
The pre-approved plans act.
yeah.
So A30 is middle of housing, A20. That's not strong enough. A21 pre-approved, and sets for ADU.
Yeah, and I would like to just throw out there that Wolf Industries only makes a certain number of designs, and that's what our son is having built. And that would be a great potential avenue. They've placed a few of these in Tolman County, or this is going to be the second or third one. And you have a built-in, it's already been vetted, it's already been permitted here, and it's such a small building that very few environmental hazards should be presented. So it seems like it could be, happy to be we won't be able to take advantage of any expedited anything. I was started this process like 6 months ago. Yeah.
I think it's expedited here,
Yeah, the guy said it's different. Every, turn around in 3 months if everything, went like this, we could have a house in place in 3 months. But it'll be a year because of largely the permitting process, forever.
Who is that again? What's the?
Wolf
Wolf.
Industries, yeah.
Yeah, my
Building code.
first years of building in Tillamook, you get a permit in 3 days. So you had your ducks in a row. Towards the end, I could literally build a structure and have it occupied in the time it took me to get a permit in. If I started that project and got a permit in for another one, I could just about have the house done before I was ready for the next one. It was insane.
Huge change.
I'm trying to understand, is it have regulatory changes made it more onerous and time consuming, or do we have less staff? Or is it both?
I think it's a little bit of both, and I mean, what I'll do is reserve this question for Director Absher next month, but what we do know is seismic requirements have changed significantly over the years. A lot of the requirements having to do with natural resources have been implemented, sort of things move along. In the 60s, we didn't have the 19 statewide planning goals, and I mean, today we do. So it's a lot of regulatory barriers and impediments, but I also think that probably staffing affects everywhere all around the state.
And just the number of permits that are processed through our planning department has increased exponentially. Without staffing increasing exponentially. We don't have enough tax dollars to do it, so fees are gonna go up and are gonna go up again. Because if we're gonna pay to have the staff, so builders don't have to wait as long, they're gonna have to pay in order for us to be able to have the staff. So it's an unfortunate circle that we're in, where we don't have the.
Yeah, the same guy doing plan reviews has got to go out and do inspections. I mean, that's just not the norm.
Yeah.
I wonder if there's some way with the new initiatives coming out of the governor's office, there could be some funding support.
So there is
House Bill capacity.
House Bill 5174, 3174, ends in 74. It is a House bill that has been passed out of committee to the floor at this time, and it specifically asks for more planners and inspectors and all of that to be paid for by the state and placed in local communities to try to help with the backlog related to housing specifically.
I mean, I just don't understand how we can increase housing and do all of the work that's proposed without adding capacity.
Absolutely, Office of Economic, whatever at the state level came up with exactly the same thing you did, and they said that we would need, I think it was close to 500 new planners and inspectors across Oregon if we were gonna build the housing that's needed. So that's where the nexus of this bill came from. It was through the Housing Innovation Partnership and AOC actually were the ones that sort of said, this is the bill we need to do. The bill also provides for grants for counties and municipalities to ask for money for those planners, builders, et cetera. It provides for a regional housing coordinator in each area of the state to help walk through the system and help local governments figure out how to do this. So, yeah.
Another thing to think about too, this is related to another strategy that we're focusing on, which is manufactured dwellings, factory built housing, mass timbers in that group. As we start to see more and more of that, those dwellings get permitted in the factory. And they're finished 95% complete there. So the state is responsible for permitting. And that last 5 or 10%, that last mile of permitting is what the local government's responsible for, but it's a much faster process. And there are opportunities there to sort of lighten the load on local governments around the state as we think about some of these new housing types.
We have a question online.
Miss has her hand up.
Miss, go ahead.
Thank you, Lynn. So a couple of points. First of all, I'm curious if we're wanting to, at some point, either now or down the road, add weighting to each of these, or are we, I'm used to having like a +1 emoji that I can put up. So like every time that it was being, pieces were being brought up that I resonated with, I wanted to be able to be like +1, you know, so I'm curious about that. And without a chat, it's really hard to even be able to weigh in. But the other thing I wanted to mention, and what Heidi and Commissioner Scar were just kind of talking about around, you know, really making an argument for additional staff at the office, like it was just brought up about B3 and B6 for streamlining the permitting. And right there in the description, it says local offices may want to designate a person to basically handhold the process. Well, that's all fine and dandy, but how do you add that to someone's already super full work plan? So I really liked the discussion around how would we find funding. I don't know if that's something that would be possible to find funding for if you're able to write grants to support staffing. Don't know the answer to that one. But of course, my passion for this work really lied in the first ones that were lifted up around tiny homes and just ensuring low barrier housing options to folks and making those allowable to be developed. Thank you.
Yes, I really appreciate your thoughts there. A couple of things I want to share. There unfortunately was an executive decision at the leadership level made that was saying we really are going to turn off comments for all public meetings for a number of reasons. And so it's unfortunate, but that is the result of why we're not able to share. Ideally, we would have had the opportunity for people to comment in the chat. Similarly, I wasn't able to sort of send this out to everyone in the chat. Ideally, when we're doing an interactive exercise, you can kind of do the +1. So my intent here is to send this all out to you via email afterwards. And what I'm going to do is include a very brief form, which simply asks you to sort of rank which of these you support, which you think are really good ideas, which you think are good ideas, but might need to be halted and thought through. Remember that middle category, and which ones you think are great ideas, but really challenging in terms of displacement or other unintended consequences. And then that weighting, the way that we're doing that, will come back to this commission next month. And then I think we'll have some more in-depth conversations within committees based on some of the things we've discussed today and the people and the ideas that we might build out.
So one suggestion on your agenda is that you could include hyperlinks on the agenda and then people can access it that way too.
That's a great idea. I did that today for the brownfield topic. There's a hyperlink to Housing Solutions. Thank you, Michelle.
Yeah, and is there any way we can gonna wrap this up?
Yep, we're pretty much there.
Yes, I don't know. Just to.
Lightweight to say it.
I think this is important, but I think we could also call out, because I'm just focusing back on our original, housing forum that we did where we ran around and put stickers.
Yep.
On all the ideas when we came up with our first 3 strategies. And that was such a powerful tool, even though now we're not all in that room. So I like your ability to send this information out to everybody so we can put our stickers and weight which ones are our most important, because then we can wrap around and get some more priorities as a group together.
That's awesome. Thank you, Carrie.
I like that, and I just want to say, like, in communications, to be able to say, in 2019, these 3 priorities were selected, and now to be able to say, we've executed, each time we have a win, we get to communicate that back out, and I think it's very powerful, and it's been very well received when we do communicate this out, so I think picking like the 3 strategies again and sticking with something that's manageable is a good idea.
I'm sure people already know this, but, what? Don't be a quiet talker, sorry. When we were doing some work in the outreach committee and we were talking about the 1-pagers, and we were thinking through kind of ADUs and what we should have, we all went out and did a lot of research on, is there already something out there that we could just piggyback on or use as a template? And there are just a ton of cities that have pre-approved plans in place for some of these, the things that we talked about earlier, that really limits the permitting time because it's already gone through that process. And just like what you were talking about with both industries, there are a lot of cities that we could look to, have already done some of that work.
We did that, well, the city of Eugene had done that as well, and then also I think Bend is working on that right now, the number of cities around the state. So
There's several.
That's exciting, thank you. Okay, so I just want to give a quick update on the Brownfield project. I had the opportunity to meet in person with our selected environmental consultant. And again, I shared with folks before, but it's worth sharing again, that we went through a very competitive bidding process. There were 3 consulting firms, all 3 nationally known and excellent firms, that submitted proposals to the county. We went through a very detailed process with multiple stakeholders, including Jim Fanjoy, an architect here locally, who was a disinterested, non-employed person on that selection committee. We also had Michelle Bradley from here at the Port of Tillamook Bay. She'll be working with us on the Brownfield Advisory Committee. We had Rachel Haggerty as well as Sean Blanchard, both from the Board of County Commissioners Office. That was our Chief of Staff, as well as our Treasurer. And we had Chris Keola, who's our Environmental Program Manager, who's handling pretty much everything having to do with septic tanks and other environmental programs. And he actually was involved in the Salmonberry Trail project as well. And we also brought in Mike, I'm drawing a blank on his last name, the surveyor.
Bryce.
Thank you. Yes, and Mike Rice was involved in that as well. So we did a 2-step process. It was quantitative, in which each one of the selection committee members looked at the written proposal, and they assigned a 1 through 5 score on 19 categories, including the firm's ability to do public outreach, the amount of people they have on the team that are versed in the different areas. So you need planners, you need environmental consultants, people from around the board. And so we had questions on that specifically. Who's on your team? What can they do? We did select CHA Consultants. I'm not sure what that acronym means. I was going to look it up, but I forgot. But they are a large firm based out of the Southeast. So they're based out of Georgia, but they're all over the country. Keith Jorban, who is our lead project manager, came out last week, and we took a tour of the 5 sites that we've identified and that we've told EPA that we are going to start with. And just a quick update about that. First off, I shared with folks last month that there's sort of a 3-step process. There's a phase 1 assessment and then a phase 2. And then sort of a list of all the cleanup things that need to be done after the investigation. There are 5 sites that are going to get that full treatment. And we drove around each one of those sites. We met with the owners in Bay City at the old paintbrush candle factory. And there are some exciting opportunities and traction that we're going to see coming out of this project almost immediately. It's really pleased to hear from Keith that he believes ahead of most of the other grant recipients in the state in terms of identifying properties and getting people on board and ready to start assessing these sites and look at them for housing. A couple of them could start developing within the next year, depending on what that environmental site assessment says. So this is super, super exciting stuff. I want to call to everyone's attention that there's a link that is attached to the word resources under Brownfield project and update resources. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen very quickly just to show folks what this looks like. I won't spend too much time on this. One thing to note, however, is that this website is cited multiple times throughout the document that we just looked at for housing production strategies. So many of the examples that are used in the different housing production strategies link to different pages on Local Housing Solutions website. But this is just something that I wanted to call your attention to. Brownfields may provide access to property in high opportunity neighborhoods that have limited remaining opportunities for development. That's us. That's Tillamook County. Brownfield redevelopment also enables communities to spur job creation through commercial infill development. It's not surprising that many of these properties are currently or were formerly owned by employers here locally. We're thinking about what is the next step for these properties? How can we support our employees through the work that's going to come out of this if there's going to be housing? Both of these things that brownfields are really good at addressing are issues that we have here in Tillamook County. So again, this is one more plug to let you all know a couple of things. We're gonna have a public kickoff at the end of this month. I'm going on a family leave starting tomorrow, and I'll be gone for about 15 days or so. When we return, our consultant is going to be working with us to lead a public kickoff. That'll happen here. You all will receive an email from me about when that is and what we'll be doing during that kickoff. We are recruiting members for our Brownfield Advisory Committee. Just wanted to note that the folks that I mentioned who were on that selection committee, many of them are sitting on this Brownfield Advisory Committee. It's critically important that we have support from folks who are also focused on housing. This grant is looking at opportunities for housing as its primary focus. So if you have an interest in learning more about the phase 1, phase 2 assessment and how brownfields dovetail into the work that we are doing, we'd love to have you on that committee. Please send myself or Director Absher an email to let us know that you're interested.
And what's the time commitment for this?
The time commitment will typically be an hour and a half per month. So we'll meet once per month, and kind of similar to the Housing Commission or any of your other roles, there might be a half an hour to an hour of sort of prep time before those meetings, and we'll prime you with resources and information. We'll also have the support of that consultant team to help us out with that as well.
Thank you. Anna?
Miss and Megan.
Let's go with Miss first and then.
Thank you, Carrie. I'm wondering, TJ, if there is a virtual option for that committee?
Yeah, Miss, that's a great question. Yes, there is. It will be in hybrid format, just like this meeting. So if you're interested in participating remotely, absolutely.
Thank you.
Nathan?
Megan.
Megan?
Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, TJ, are you at liberty to release those 5 sites of where they're at? I know McRae's is one, but do you know what are the other 4?
We do know where those sites are located, and it is in general public information because it was submitted to EPA. However, they haven't stamped the approval for those sites being included yet. We're going through that final process. So I could probably talk about it now. I'll refrain from talking about it at this moment, but it will be included in our public announcement.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
All right, TJ, can I have you circle back to
Yep, it's as a skin.
the commission policies and documents?
Thank you so much. I got so excited about brownfield stuff. I just jumped right into it. So I wanted to go ahead and take a moment for the benefit. We have a lot of new members here. And I wanted to take a moment to talk a little bit about some of the policies we have. Carrie, by the way, you have a binder in front of you today. I learned that Carrie didn't get her binder when we distributed them out. So first off, let me get a show of hands, both online and in person, who has not received a binder for the Housing Commission? Housing commissioners. Okay, so a couple of things that I wanted to circle back and talk about. With Lynn now working on housing very closely with myself and Director Absher, she is handling all social media posts and updates moving forward. So that will not be a role that I continue to take on. I'll be supporting that, but Lynn is our go-to person. So the outreach committee knows to direct all of that information to Lynn. And one thing I wanted to take a moment to highlight today is just our social media policy. Lynn has been added as one of the county representatives with authorization to make posts. The county takes this very seriously. There was a document and a training and lots of different pieces. Lynn had to meet with IT director. And it's incumbent upon us to treat this very carefully as a government entity, the things we say, the things we don't say, the way that we handle ourselves. But it's also important to talk a little bit about housing commissioners and the policies that are in place for any comments or posts that you make online. And that you make clear that if you're making a public comment about your opinion, that you state that. In this housing commission social media policy that I have in front of me, I wanted to make sure, did anybody not receive this in their packet or their binder? I'm guessing it's in there. I think I started with, I think I included the binders and then circled back with the policy if I'm not mistaken. So there might be some binders out there that don't have it included. It is on the OneDrive online, and I can go ahead and if anybody wants to know where that is, I can make sure you see where that link is. But it's also here in paper form. I just wanted to highlight that it's really, really important as we're communicating with the community. If you have any questions about this policy or things that you should be saying or things that you want to be saying but aren't sure, I would recommend that you direct those questions to our outreach committee or to Director Absher, as they can provide guidance on, what is it that we want to be talking about publicly and how are we sharing those terms and those ideas? Michelle, do you want to comment on that at all? I don't mean to put you on the spot. I know I didn't ask you to, but.
No, I think it's also just one of the things that we did talk about early on is that even when we post these on our personal pages, or if we're on a community page and we say something and we're members of the commission, it can be interpreted that the commission stands behind those comments. So just to be extremely diligent and disciplined in how we conduct ourselves publicly.
Very well said. Thank you. I think that buttons that up. Thank you, Carrie.
Yeah. Well, I'm gonna work on the updates. Representative Commissioner Star, would you like to give our BOCC?
Sure, I can do that. So, do you want me to go ahead and cover Senate Bill 406 or you want to?
I just have a couple of things to add on, so if you like, I can add to it.
Okay, perfect. So Senate Bill 406 did move. So Senate Bill 406, we haven't talked about it a ton, and the reason was that it was a legislative concept for quite some time before it actually became Senate Bill 406. And then the language that was attributed to Senate Bill 406 was draft, and so we didn't want to get everybody very caught up in Senate Bill 406 until we had the amendment language in place, because as it was drafted, it was very confusing. So the amendment language was finally put in place. Senate Bill 406 is intended to add cities in Tillamook County regardless of size, and Tillamook County's urbanized unincorporated communities, all of those to House Bill 2001 and the implementation work of that, which means that it would require cities and the county to put into our development code or our planning that we would allow duplexes, triplexes, fourplexes, and cottage clusters in certain residential zones. Okay, so it's one where the state says you must do this. They did this in 2019 for cities of over 10,000, but we don't have any cities of over 10,000 in Tillamook County, and half of our county only has unincorporated communities. They don't even have a city. So it left us behind. And it left us behind in an important way, which is that there's funding attached to getting technical assistance to get these changes put into your city and county code, right? And so we didn't have the opportunity to get that assistance because it wasn't required of us. Okay, so one of the things that was really crucial is we wanted to be in line with everybody else and on equal ground with everybody else. The other thing that it did is it made changing the code a requirement, which meant that it can't get caught up in local politics as to whether or not this should or shouldn't happen, which is really important if you want to move forward with having those additional housing types get approved. Because it's complicated. Anybody who's been to the Planning Commission and heard the conversations around what different people think, it can very easily derail the very work that we have identified needs to happen with added density, right? So being put into House Bill 2001 basically says it's not a choice of if you do it, there is some choice on how you do it, right? You get to choose what you set, what are your setbacks going to be, all the same kind of things that you do for anything else, but you don't have a choice of whether you do or don't. You just have a choice of how. So what Senate Bill 406 does is it pulls Tillamook County into that arena, where we would be required, all of our cities and our unincorporated communities that have sewer and water. So when I say urbanizable and incorporated communities, I'm talking about those with sewer and water. So we would have to do that work. The other thing that it does with the Senate bill, House Bill 2001 that was passed in this session, which is all lumped together, is it would put us in a position where we would be required to do a buildable lands inventory and ultimately housing production strategy. So what we're talking about today with the housing production strategy approaches, that would be required, again, of our cities and our unincorporated communities in Tillamook. So we're really putting ourselves into the game and saying, we understand that you think you were being really nice in leaving out small cities and unincorporated areas, but what you've really done is disadvantage us because you have put us in a position where we have to fight to get changes that allow duplexes, triplexes, fourplexes, and cottage clusters, and we may not win that fight. You have put us at the end of the line for any technical assistance money to help us get through that process, right? And when we get to the place where the state is doing their housing needs analysis, they won't call out numbers for us because we won't be in the priority. Again, we'll be pushed to the back of the line. And what we're asking is to be placed in line with everybody else so we can move forward to help people in our communities who are struggling with housing. Our communities, our people are struggling just as much as anyone in a city of 10,000 or greater. So don't leave us behind without any assistance, without any resources, and without any sort of political will to get this done. That is what Senate Bill 406 does. So Senate Bill 406 passed out of the committee and to the Senate floor with a due pass recommendation. So that is where it's at the moment, to my understanding. So Carrie can let me know. What we don't know is if it will get the pass on the floor. Assuming it does, then it will move to, there's a number of different places they can send it. So we think it might go to the House and might go to a committee of the House. It might, apparently can actually just go to the floor of the House. It can go to the Rules Committee. They can decide where they want to push it. And so as to what's next, it's this funny, it depends. So we don't know. But right now it is, it's on the House or on the Senate floor for a vote with a due pass recommendation, as far as I know.
That is as far as I know too. I just wanted to call out the people that were involved in the Housing Commission that expressed support for this bill by providing public testimony. We had Misty Wharton, the Neoconi School, sorry, not Neoconi, the Succa Valley School District Superintendent, Trevor Belts of the Tillamook County Creamery Association, and our ex officio member of the Legislative Committee, Ed Gallagher, Kristen Kopiek, David Bennett, and myself. So we had cast a wide net of people that, as individuals, I think we got this. At least I like to believe that we helped push it forward to get it passed out of committee. So
for sure, thank you. We appreciate all of that support because it was important to have. And Michelle, you spoke.
I did.
Michelle, she came
testimony.
and gave verbal public testimony, Sarah and I were there.
And I would have written testimony, but I wanted it to come from Tillamook County Wellness, and I wasn't able to pull that off. So I could have done it personally, but I figured since I've already given that.
So we're all very pleased that it moved forward, and now we are hopeful that it will keep moving forward. I have talked with Representative Javity, and if the House is where they send it, and if it goes to the Housing Committee, which he sits on, he said he would be very happy to sort of champion that in the House. So we'll hope that that's the direction they send it, and that we're able to use his support to help carry it through that chamber as well. We did talk with DLCD, and they determined there was no fiscal impact, which was helpful to the bill, because then it didn't go to Ways and Means where a lot of things go to die. It decided that with the 2.5 million they already had in House Bill 2001, they could fit our technical assistance into that. So that was a really positive, huge win that they determined it wouldn't take more money. Yeah, so that was really good. And then Sarah has been making the rounds, talking with different city councils in Tillamook to make sure that we're not surprising any of our small cities. We had previously spoken with all of the city managers and city planners. All of them said, yes, we're on board. We're either already amending our code or would love to amend our code. So we want to be in, and so they are supporting us as we go to their different city councils. City of Manzanita, City of Bay City, City of Wheeler, I believe, have already said yes, that they're definitely on board. Sarah had lunch with Mayor Garibaldi, since they don't have a city manager or a planner at the moment. He said, yep, definitely on board. He'd be happy to carry that forward to their city council. I'm meeting with Nehalem City Council on Monday. So we're working, Tillamook already said yes, I said that one. So we're working our way through, just making sure, and it's really, really exciting because the work of the Housing Commission has laid the groundwork in so many ways, because our cities are all like, we know you're doing good work, we agree, let's do this thing. We want to be a part of the solution. So that's really, really powerful for us to, as we work with Suzanne to move this bill forward, is the work of the Housing Commission has just, our cities are on board. That's not true in a lot of counties. A lot of counties and cities are completely at odds,
Especially when
right?
it comes as a directive from the state.
Right.
This is more of a ground up than a top down, and makes a huge difference.
Definitely, it's huge. The legislative committee had identified one of the things that would help us is this work, right? And so then we were able to say, when Suzanne said, do you have a bill you want to carry? It was like, well, yes. Here's a concept that's come from our Housing Commission. It's one that we think is the right thing. So, it's really good. And, there will be work to be done when it's time for these cities, so the 2003, 2005 biennia will be to amend their codes for triplex, duplex, cottage cluster, all that's 2000, 2005. 2005 to 2007 is when the ORHNA, or the Oregon Housing Needs Analysis, will be done. We'll get our numbers, we will be given production strategies out, or production numbers out of that, and we will have to have the production strategies. What makes me feel confident in going to city councils and saying, I know that may seem daunting, is exactly this work that TJ's leading us through right now. We're gonna have chosen housing production strategies and already have been working on them, so that when it comes time for those cities to put together their plans, they're gonna be able to fall back to much of the work that this commission has already done, because it does include things like property tax abatement. They can opt into that, and that proves within their housing strategy, they're already working on it. They can adopt whatever we choose in ADUs, right? Many of them have done that, right? They can adopt that. They can then look at whatever we do next and decide if that fits for their city, and we will have already laid the groundwork for them just to say yes, and then to get that plan put together. So, it's what will seem daunting for them, this commission will have done a lot of. So I thank you all for that work. It makes this possible. So that was Senate Bill 406. And the only other thing I would just say, we did approve a letter of the Board of Commissioners for the Housing First project, and it is 60 units of affordable housing in Manzanita. So just that's the base concept of it. And they're in partnership with the other developers in Manzanita, whose names I will forget.
It's not Greenlight.
No, it's Home First and Greenlight are doing this.
Right.
But then there's
I don't remember.
the developers that have been working forever by the golf course up there trying to do something, are carving off this piece and giving it. I don't know how they're probably selling it to these guys for affordable, but they're also have identified a section for workforce. So this will be not just an affordable housing development kind of dropped into the middle of Manzanita, but there will be actually some mixed income that sort of pairs up with that, so that there's workforce housing and affordable housing both. So, and I forget the names of those developers, but.
It's the other one's doing the free phase project nearby, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm talking with Melissa about this, and it's drawing a blank, but good things happening.
Good things happening. So that's just the bones of it. We'll look forward to them coming and tell us more about it.
Thank you. TJ, do you have anything additional to add?
I think I've added a lot of information already to this meeting. One thing I wanted to mention, I was looking, and this is related to the work that you're doing on Senator Weber's bill. I noticed in the governor's budget, they removed $1 million for House Bill 2003. Now, we have a couple of years to phase in. So one thing we might think about is adding an appropriation to that bill that backfills what we'll need for technical assistance. Because I think the perception is that all the communities that had to have it rolled in under 2001 are there, and they had their technical assistance, and they had either a model ordinance or their own ordinance. Having that support would be great. I was reading it just the other day. I was like thinking, we should ask them for some money, a little extra.
Right, and the challenge with adding money is when the ways and means to die. So I will say that Ethan and I talked about that when we talked about the bill, and he said, no, we've got you covered. So I'm like,
Good
okay.
deal.
Yeah, because I said, we need everything that everyone's gotten, and that includes that work, so. Yeah,
Awesome. That is
I think
amazing.
they got us, but it's a really good call out.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's all I have. We'll go on.
Michelle, outreach.
Yeah, so in addition to the work that we've done on getting the materials, the outreach materials together, we had a good meeting last week where we really got more organized and prioritized our communications. We got kind of sucked into the Senate Bill 401 vortex, and when we came back together, we said we really need to get back on track with ADUs and getting information out about ADUs. So that's going to be a priority. We're also going to begin sharing progress for builds that are happening with photos and little snippets through the social media outreach that's going to be forthcoming. And then I guess I would just ask Heidi or Kristen if they have anything to add.
No, other than, what I've already said about the research that we're trying to do to come up with additional information on ADUs that might be helpful for the community just to understand, what it really means, and potential for, documents and artifacts to share.
The other thing I should mention is that and I don't think we've even had a chance to connect about this, but we're going to kind of divide and conquer. And so we'll each kind of own a particular area of outreach focus. And we will also each be a liaison to the other committees so that we can be communicate out progress from your individual committees. So be thinking about that, whatever goals you're setting and achieving or the progress that you're making toward that, we need to establish that two-way communication with our outreach liaisons so that we can get little things written up and posted, and really have the pipeline of progress.
Dave.
Dave?
Yeah.
Just as a kind of a closing, what comes to mind for me is that so often these real estate projects are each very unique and face unique challenges. And thinking about all the expertise and knowledge and experience that we have amongst the members in this room, I would love to see at some point in time an inventory of the housing projects that are underway. Both those are just starting and those that have made some progress towards development, and an understanding of what challenges, if any, they face. And those challenges, of course, could be regulatory. They could be with regard to debt funding, equity funding. In some prior experience with development opportunities, we would bring a group together like this and talk about individual unique opportunities. And it was kind of amazing, some of the creative ideas that came out of kind of a meeting together. And so, and this would be the appropriate forum, I don't know, but if there was a way for us to be informed about going housing development projects that seem to be delayed or stuck or having issues, I'd love to apply some of the expertise we have in the room and some of the tools and resources we've talked about earlier to each of those individual projects. We can at least accelerate the development and get them online and get people living in those houses.
Thank you. John, do you have an update for us on development?
Yes, I was told that there's a 12-plex going in that property on 3rd Street where they tore that house down. Is that
I've heard that as well.
Yeah.
correct? The one used to be the Alexander property. It's by the storage units there.
Right across from the Hampton.
Yeah, and I wanted to bring that issue up and wondering if we could get the developer's name or contact to talk to him about other potential properties.
Well, and what Sarah was talking about was having Brian.
Yes.
So he probably has to go to that site, right?
Yeah.
So even though it's not one of the developers we're working with, When Brian's going out on site to do his inspections, he is supposed to be taking photos and, yeah, so I mean, I think we just really need to dial that in. Maybe we need to invite Brian in to communicate, strategy for that, but 'cause he could share that photo, and then we'll craft a little blurb, if he can give us like the address, the name of the, any pertinent details.
Yeah.
And provide.
Yeah,
the status
I'd like to
updates.
contact, and there's other property,
Yeah.
the farm up there for sale on Third Street. There's a lot of ground there. And another issue was I was called on the phone by our new member from South County, said,
Dave.
Yeah.
and I want to apologize today for not getting back to him. He called me during spring break. I had 3 grandkids running around and I was very short. And he wants to get together on my views of what direction we should go as development committee. And I would really like to get together with him. More the merrier. And one other issue that came up was our meeting with the couple from Switzerland living in Idaho. Purchasing some property in Bay City and want to do, I guess tiny homes would be the right terminology?
Yeah.
Of like a village type thing, where they have these to rent or sell. I'm assuming they're looking at renting. And I found that to be a really neat avenue to a stopping point for people that move here, that they have their own individual space while they're looking or trying to expand into a home. And I thought that was very a neat little conversation we had with them. Looking forward to meeting them more and going to the property and helping them figure out how to get this to work.
Yeah, it's exciting. Bay City's really interested in this project. They were very open to the idea.
And that's new for Bay City.
Isn't it?
That's what I hear.
Yeah, it's nice.
It hurts nights already.
Megan, do you have a question or comment?
Yeah, I just wanted to give a quick update to that Third Street project you were talking about. So we had a pre-application meeting with them, which is required for new site development. And unfortunately, we have some bad news with that. That sewer system would be connected to our 12th Street pump station that is having issues. So it may be a couple years out if he wants to wait and connect to that 12th Street, or he may choose to create his own line and then connect with a one out on Miller that goes out toward 5th Street. So the ball is in his court at this point. I think he has some decisions to make on what he wants to do, because that's obviously costly to go that far with a new line. So I think he's back to the drawing board at this point. So that project's kind of on hold right now. We haven't heard anything since our pre-application a few weeks ago.
Is this where we can help?
Yes, so there's 2 things that come to mind. Number 1, Megan, if it would be appropriate, I'd love to give you the link to our developer survey. As a developer here locally, he can talk about some of those challenges and things that could support him. That we have both questions in that survey. Adding another developer to that is going to make that data stronger. And the second thing is that I would strongly encourage listening, maybe having the Housing Commission listen to the concept. Our housing fund is opening up this year, and one of the things that we are looking at is infrastructure constraints. So if this is a 12-unit complex, it's not common that we find this kind of density here locally.
No.
I'd be very interested, given the support of this group, to listen to what those challenges are, and with the finance committee's particular thoughts and comments afterwards.
We did tell him to reach out to you.
Okay.
For that funding for this next round coming up. I told him, I said, it's not guaranteed because we already did our multifamily, but I said, talk to TJ because maybe it's something you could throw your hat in the ring for. So.
Absolutely.
Is it inappropriate, Megan, for you to give TJ the developer's contact information? I just would hate for them to just make assumptions that it's too much of a hassle and walk.
Oh, not at all. That's all public information. So yeah, I can forward that over to TJ.
That would be amazing. I'd be happy to initiate that conversation and make sure the right people are in the room having that conversation.
And if we show a community that's willing to help a developer like that, there could be more he would do here.
Absolutely. John, can I add something to your prior comment as well about the village tiny home concept? As we're thinking about housing production strategies, this is among those. I want to plug a resource for you all as you're researching and thinking about housing production strategy. It's called the Village Collaborative. It's an excellent website. One of the first things you'll land on is a GIS map of the entire country, and every single village collaborative project, there's a couple hundred of them around the country. All of them are telling their story. They have links to their website. They talk about how they got there, number of units, and the permitting process is included in many of those as well. We have several in the state of Oregon, including 2 in the city of Eugene and a couple in Bend. So really exciting things to look at that can support Peter and his wife as they move forward with their concept too.
So I hope you can reach out to the developer. I would hate to see that just slip away.
Yeah, I'll look for Megan's email. I'll let you know once I touch base with them and invite them to the committee if that's a good idea.
All right, Ms., just to keep us going here.
Right.
Updates on credits.
Yes, thank you, Carrie. A couple of things to add. There is also a tiny home village in Lincoln City that I've been in touch with and am trying to arrange a tour. So that's a little closer. I want to also welcome Dave Bennett to the commission and thank him for attending the finance committee meeting. A lot of great information shared, and we did focus completely on the 23-24 housing fund framework for our last committee meeting, and just continue to appreciate the contributions and engagement of everyone that's on the committee. And I don't know if anyone else has anything they would like to add, but that's all I have, and I do need to hop off for another meeting. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. All right, well, legislative, that's me. I don't have any nice big handout this go around. It's been a pretty busy time of year. I had budget committees this week and some other things. I did update our workbook. It looks like there's about, out of the 122 bills that were tracked, we had 78 that seem to be still alive, or at least somewhat live right now. House bill, the big omnibus bill, 2001, looked like it was at the Senate desk waiting third reading. I think it's now been signed by the governor. That was a homeless process. And then I also wanted to report back one bill, Senate Bill 1013, which allows for a placement of an RV in unincorporated residentially zoned lands. It actually passed, it's been gone from the Senate to the House. So that is, I think, a huge opportunity, because I know we had one time here in Tolman County had allowed single mobile home occupancies in rural residential areas. And that was turned over by DLCD saying, no, you can't do that anymore. Because those are not for permanent occupancy. So this is a total shifting gears. So we'll see where that goes. But it passed the Senate, so it's off to the House now.
It's really good. I mean, in addition to like a property owner allowing somebody to be in an RV on their property, it would also, because I've had people tell me this, they wanted to buy and develop property and live in their RV while they were developing it. They were told that they couldn't.
I believe that they can do that during if they have an active building permit for a period of 2 years. But you can't live on a property without, and now this one does require that you do have a permanent residence on the property.
Okay.
And be able to provide sewer, water, and services is what they called it. So I don't know exactly what that entails. It wasn't super detailed, but it did allow for a lot of opting in, tracking, and our permitting process. So there was a lot of good language in there that really allowed for counties and to customize that to meet the needs of the community. So I was encouraged by that. And then I don't have I have a giant list of all of them printed out. So I plan on next go around next month, providing you a little bit more detailed list of where things are, but there was a lot of movement because it was kind of the first round of Dead or Alive that happened. So we have a good idea now of what's still out there remaining. And so we will have a more, I guess, a larger, more thorough report next go around. So be patient. We're working behind the scenes. And with that, is there any public comment that would like to be, any members of the public that would like to comment?
I might comment that I'm going to attend the next commission meeting in next month. And I'm really looking forward to getting back and getting up to speed because there's a lot to learn. So looking forward to it.
Thanks, Ed. Welcome back.
Gail.
Gail, go ahead.
Yeah, I just have a request, and that would be to have some access to agendas before the meetings. I don't know how to find those.
Gail, they're in the same place they always should be. I missed this month. I saw your email this morning. I'm sorry I didn't get back to you. That will be up there today. I overlooked that piece and that one's on me. My apologies.
Okay, thank you.
All right, well, thank you guys. With 5 minutes past, so I'm gonna close down the meeting tonight, or today, this morning.
Thank you, Kara.
Yeah.
You're looking good, Ed. I can't hear you.
I'm excited. Tomorrow is the first day I get to drive my car.
Oh.
I've been not driving for 2 months, which is really bizarre. Mary's been my chauffeur, which actually allows me to see a lot of the countryside that I normally don't look at while driving. So that's a plus. But yeah, I'm looking forward to being at the next meeting and a lot of catching up to do because boy, I have not focused a lot on things. So
Don't worry. Don't worry about it. You will catch up.
Yeah.
We're just so happy to see you back.
Pretty amazing process that I've been through. It involves editing of DNA genes.
Wow.
So
yeah, Mary was telling me a little bit about
it's a little bit complicated and
Amazing.
I don't fully understand it either, but
wow, it's fabulous.
yeah, it seems to be working. So
yeah, you seem really well.
yeah, I've really, my energy level's back and feeling pretty good. I'm anxious to get stuff done around the house and all that kind of thing that I've been letting slide. So, yeah, you look good, well too.
Thank you. Good to see you back.
Okay, take care.
Bye.
Bye.